Welcome to the Michele Roy Show.
Liz, you're amazing. I have to say that. I'm very, very, very grateful that you took the time to be on this podcast today. So, for all our listeners out there, thank you once again for tuning in. Today, I have a special guest, Liz. She's all the way from the States, and she is a nutritional therapist practitioner. And she's here to give us some insight, but most of all, to walk us through her own journey and what led her to do what she's doing right now and how she can help you as well. If you're somebody that's having cancer or having treatment or being a carer, she is the right person that you should listen to. So, Liz, would you walk us through a little bit your background and your story, please?
Okay. Well, first of all, I I'm entirely in this profession by the grace of God. I was originally a fashion designer for many years, and in January of 2023, my husband was diagnosed with a very rare stage 4 appendiceal adenocarcinoma, which is a gastric cancer. It is a very aggressive cancer that really has no cure. They have very little information on it and even treatments for it, other than, of course, surgeries and chemo. But even the chemo that they suggested for him was for colon cancer, not even for his cancer, because there's really nothing for his cancer. So that's what led me down this path. And like I said, it was God's will for me to be here, and now I've turned it into really my passion and something that I do for my living. And more intentionally, I think it's got nothing to do with an income or anything like that. It's more because both my husband and we have the conviction now that we can no longer live without obviously reciprocating God's mercy and grace on us, but to help others, right? To be of service of others. And yeah, that's what we're doing.
Amazing. I mean, it probably a very big shock as well to get that big mouthful of what the cancer was as well. But just to navigate all of that, you do have three kids, right? So
Yes.
how was that initially for you and your family?
I think that it's got to be, it's similar to, I think, what every person experiences when they are told that big C word, right? So you're not expecting it. In reality, unless you've been through cancer because of you or for a very close loved one, we all avoid it like the plague, right? It's almost like if it's contagious or something. So we know nothing of cancer unless we're having to face it. So I always describe that moment, and to be honest with you, the first 3 months of that diagnosis, kind of like being hit by a train and landing 3,000 miles away from home. And when you are, you're kind of just waking up from that huge hit, and your first instinct, right, is to want to come home, to what's familiar, to want to come home to what you know and what's comforting. However, a lot of the times, and by that I mean belief systems, ways of lifestyle, a lot of the time that's what created the disease. So I realized in those first 3 months that wanting to stick to what we knew all the time was not the answer, that we needed to change. And I tell people that, I say this all the time. I'm like, I realized that coming home was not possible. It wasn't the best choice. We had to build a new home, and it needed to look very different, and it needed to be very intentional in both mentally, spiritually, physically. And that's exactly what we set out to do. And I mean, I paint it very pretty, but it was very, very hard, including with the kids. I mean, we did not tell our kids for the first 3 months because we did not feel that we had enough answers to be able to answer their questions. And I didn't want them to go through the uncertainty that I felt. I felt that when I was ready to answer their questions, that I would be able to tell them. And also for us, there was one of the critical things was that we could not find out our staging until our second surgery.
Wow. It's a
Yes.
huge
That was,
process.
yes. And that took 3 months. So that was living under an extreme amount of uncertainty for a long time. And but it gave us, to be honest with you, it's like God is always working.
Mm.
It gave us time to not be reactive, but be able to respond to our situation.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of grace as well to be able to endure that and having to hold that from the children, but being able to process for yourself so that you're in a better place to explain it and know what to go forward to. I think it's a really courageous and very amazing that you were able to do that because a lot of times I think people just become so overwhelmed with news that
Yeah.
they just, like you're saying, want to go to that familiar place and what are we going to do that's going to be different, that we're going to try to get a different result. And so how did that led you to the nutrition?
Um, okay. So when I first, when we were first diagnosed, like I said, we had gone through, for him, it started as a rupture of his appendix. Well, it didn't rupture, it was about to rupture, but it started as appendicitis. We thought it was just a regular appendicitis. 5 days later, after they had done the actual pathology on it and the reason why he had appendicitis, which is a normal routine, they called us back and said, hey, what caused your appendicitis is a tumor. And it's appendiceal adenocarcinoma at that point. And it was, like I said, we, you know, we were so in shock, which I think is part of what people go through, right? It's not just the overwhelm, but you kind of become a little possum at that point because you don't know where to go and where to turn. For us, the way that it went, which doesn't always work out with every cancer, but so that was surgery one. And what ended up happening is he also had developed after COVID an autoimmune disease called ITP, immunothrombocytopenia, which is where your bone marrow creates the platelets, but your spleen kills him. So because of that, they had scheduled the second surgery for February 9th, 2023. And because of it, they were afraid that he could bleed to death at the actual surgery. So they postponed it and wanted to do a treatment to increase his white blood cell and also his platelet count. Unfortunately, that treatment did not work at all. So now the surgery was scheduled for March 9th, which gratefully we did do, which is why we went through those 3 months in total. And that's at that point, it's when we were told it's a stage 4 because it had metastasized into the small intestine. In total, they were able to remove 2 feet of colon, 2 feet of intestine, and all of his omentum. He lost 30 pounds in 5 days at the hospital. And as how these things go, he was gray and weak and just very worn out. And with most gastric cancer, you will see a huge level of weight loss very quickly. Okay, that's very standard for gastric cancers. What ended up happening is that because of God's grace, once again, masked into what we think could be something so bad, he could not start chemo because of the ITP. And it wasn't until end of June of 2023, surgery was March 9th, now we're end of June, it was when he was scheduled to start the first chemo. So we had all these months and we were able to look for outlets of other ways of doing, because when we went to interview 3 oncologists to see who we would go with, everybody had the same protocol. And every single doctor was like, this is what it is. This is step 1. This is how and I'm sitting there through all of these appointments and was like, at what point do you take my husband into consideration? Like him himself, like this guy, not everybody else, just this one guy. And so it wasn't enough for me. It wasn't enough for me. And that's when I started to look elsewhere. And once again, God graced me with seeing a friend of mine who I had not seen in over 10 years. I bump into her at a French bakery after 10 years of not seeing her. And she was, bald. You could tell she was going through treatment, but she was pink and beautiful and full of energy and just happy and living. And she was outside, not wearing a mask on a Sunday afternoon. And so this was the Sunday before his March 9th surgery. And I said, Elizabeth, how do you look like this? I see you're going through treatment, but how do you look full of life? And she's like, well, I'm doing all this integrative medicine on top of the fact that I'm doing chemo. And I was like, I will call you next week. As soon as he has the surgery, I'm going to be calling you so you can give me all of the details. And then shortly after that, we went to a a clinic in California, an integrative clinic, and they really empowered us so much. However, and to get to your question, so conventional medicine and integrative medicine both provided tools to fight the cancer in many ways, but no one provided the day-to-day nutrition. The day-to-day for the actual patient and caretaker to have power back in their hands. And that's how I understood that was my role. When I stopped back and looked at, okay, we have this and we have this and we have this and we have this and we have this, and we started to like build something to fight the cancer in many different directions, but no one had the nutrition. And I said, that's where I belong. And so after hodgepodging it for several months, kind of just consuming material, reading all kinds of stuff, I decided I have to go to school. I have to go back to school. I want one vehicle, one direct path, because I'm a mom of three. You know, I was working, he stopped working. I was working full time. Like, we're talking about major overload, right? So I wanted one direction, and I never did it for the license or with the thought that I would do this like I am doing it now for others. I really did it just to support him and to support his body and to give us that tool of change that we needed and control back in our day-to-day house here. And so I did. I went back to school. I did my certification program for 1 year. And then towards the end of it, my professor was like, how can you not do this for a living? And I was like, well, it's just too close to my heart. I cry for everything. I can't imagine doing this on it every day. And as time kept passing, God kept pointing me in the same direction until finally I honestly just kneeled and said, okay, Lord, I'm going to do your will. It's not about me. This is not about anything I want or don't want. I'm here for you to use me every single day. And that's how my company was born, my new company. Yeah.
Wow. A lot of times it's through our struggles that these big things happen, right? That God brings about huge learning for us and also how we can help and serve others. I think it's beautiful that you took that. You had no control, right, with everything else that was happening, but you knew in your heart that you had to do something to help your husband. And I mean, well done. That is so brave of you to be able to do that. Not only are you managing, juggling the whole house with everything else and your husband going through treatment, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn about nutrition. And not only that, you are now helping so many other people as well. And look, here we are even talking about this. Never did you think that it would happen. But
Nope.
it happens. If we're in the right place, God can always use us. I think that's amazing. Definitely. Now, in the beginning, like you're saying, it was a really big struggle for you guys to be adjusting through all of this, right? So here you are in stage 4 cancer. How are your children's dealing with this at this time?
To be honest with you, I was given our surgeon, our actual surgeon is actually a dear friend of my husband. He went to high school with him, and that was another miracle along this path that we're in. But he said something to me, and I'm one of those people that love like bullet point messages. I'm like something I can grab and run with. And he said to me, however you deal with this disease and face it, it's the way your children will learn to face disease and adversity and sicknesses, right? And that's all I needed. And I said, okay, then I've got to saddle up. So I wanted them to see me not only move deeper into my faith instead of looking out and for other things to kind of take up the time. Number one. Number two, I wanted them to see that we hold the power too, that I wasn't just going to give the responsibility of my husband's well-being of our homes to just doctors that see us once a week or once a month. I wanted them to see that we have problem-solving skills as well, and that we have a responsibility to ourselves and to our well-being and to our bodies. I wanted them to understand that this was a team effort. So they each got responsibilities as chores in the house and ways of helping, and that they were part of this team that also gave them a purpose. And I think that was a huge game changer. So one of the things that I did, I also contacted their teachers and told them, listen, we need to, if they're having any hardship, please let me know. My daughter started to experience anxiety attacks, and I was so grateful to her teacher at the time, because when she did experience a panic attack, she would call me and I would coach her through the phone aside from teaching her different breathing techniques. And she did, honestly, she did great. My son was phenomenal. It was actually a very critical year because it was his seventh grade year. And it's a year that we need in order to have gotten like really great grades in order for him to apply to the high school that he wanted to get to. And I can honestly say that he thrived. He had principal honor roll, straight A's all through that year. And a lot of, believe it or not, the teachers asked me and said, how did you get your kids to thrive? So such a hardship. And I said, well, number one, prayer. Number two, teamwork. It is teamwork. You got to think about it in terms of like, just think of it like a basketball team. Everybody has a role. And if anybody's hurt or injured, that other people have to pick up and help each other out. But we're still together and we had one mission. Everybody understood what the mission was. And we cried when we needed to cry. We screamed and, when we needed to scream. Another thing that I did with them that I think was a game changer is we would take walks, very like long walks in the afternoon after dinner that my husband would rest. I would take the kids out for a walk. And in that time, I did it because I needed to breathe, to be honest with you. And it actually became something that all three of us needed. And we would just go for walks and be able to just kind of mind dump on one another and kind of share our feelings. And we would do that 3-4 times a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting because for myself, when I first was diagnosed, I kind of felt like what you're saying about the pain points that you had to really think about, solidify yourself so that the children can have the resilience they need. And for me was one of the main things, like, I don't want my kids to see me just in bed the whole time with no hope, just in pain the whole time. I have to find joy again. I have to be able to get up, even though the pain is so all-consuming. And that is what kind of brought us around. And my boys have been phenomenal. That's what I was saying with editing and all of that. My youngest son is like, Mom, you gotta speak. You need to go and share your word and message with people. You need to make them happy. So
They
it's
become our cheerleaders
absolutely.
and are honestly like a North Star for us as well. At least for me, for us, that's what they were.
Exactly. I think they're amazing and something that God uses, right? We strengthen them and they strengthen us through the whole ordeal. And I think even for our listeners right now that are going through a struggle or a loss or a diagnosis, how do you support each other, through it? And these are extremely great tips for them to be able to take as well. So another question for you.
Yes.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced when implementing dietary changes during the treatment that your husband had to go through?
I think honestly, I think the overwhelm at first was the hardest thing because there's no lack of information. That's for sure. The problem happens that what do you do with all that information? And how do you funnel it into something that is productive and that moves the needle forward? That's where I think the key lies because I now even in with my clients, that's the main thing. They know a lot of things or they've definitely been, researching a lot, but they almost like paralysis by analysis type thing happens to them. And they always say one thing that they say to me is like, I need help because I don't know where to start. And that's exactly what I do with our 4-pillar system that I came up with based on exactly the needs that I had. I address toxicity, deficiencies, nutrition, and mental and emotional wellness in the program because I did that in thinking of what I needed in that time and what helped move the needle forward and kind of put things in the buckets that they need to go with so that they're manageable, right? And then we're able to take on daily tasks without that overwhelm. So the other thing, to be honest with you, was just learning new recipes, right? So that's the other thing that I tell people. I'm like, even if you can just learn 10 clutch recipes that are easy, simple, whole food oriented, and meet the needs of the actual patient, that helps take the guessing work out of it. And the other thing is that a lot of cancer patients experience a lot of either diarrhea and constipation and nausea from the conventional treatment, which I'm not against, but it's mitigating those side effects from the medications. that is important. So having those the recipes and the know-how on how to take care of that versus adding more medication, which only kind of, spirals downward, to be honest with you. And the other thing that's really important is mitigating the weight loss. A lot of the times in conventional system, what we see is that the nutritionist will tell at the hospitals will tell the patient they need to eat as much as possible. That's not necessarily true because that is very, very it's so wrong and it is so damaging. It's actually, unfortunately, one of the things that I'm really, really against, and it really hurts my heart. And actually, a little bit of the veins in my neck pop out as well. But we're going to settle the Cuban in me down. But the truth is that it's about quality versus quantity. It's about looking at energy levels versus someone that maybe, yeah, they ate all this food. Now they're actually vomiting more, they're having more diarrhea, and they're having less energy, and they're in bed and can't get up. That's what we don't want to do. So the right nutrition will give them the energy. So I'm not always looking at the scale, even though, yes, we look at that because it's something that we have to mitigate. However, energy is a better marker to look at, right? Are they able to walk? Are they able to, hold conversations? Are they coherent? Are they living life through treatment? With that being said, whenever someone is diagnosed right away, if they start to implement these changes and integrative modalities, the sooner they do that, the better they will go through the treatment.
So based on your experience, what are the key nutritional principles that support healing?
Okay, that is a great question because I think it's not just nutrition. I think that the way people see it is as nutrition. However, I'm going to answer that various ways. As far as nutrition is concerned, we definitely want, like I was saying earlier, that it's not about quantity, it's about quality of food. Instead of just looking at weight gain or weight loss, I think it's about energy that we need to be measuring in the actual patient and seeing what kind of quality of life they have. I always say this to all of my clients, and I say, movement is life. So we support the body through nutrition so that they're able to move and have quality of life and be able to exercise and actually be able to go for walks, because in turn, what that does is supports their mental well-being. 50% of this, if not more, to be honest with you, is in our mind, is the mental wellness that we need to be addressing. All right. And I think that is for every disease. I'm sure you can totally testify to that.
Absolutely. I can identify with that one all the way.
And it's the same with cancer. It really is. And I understood that. I understood that if my husband lost 130 pounds, which is what he would have lost through just conventional treatment and not addressing nutrition in the way, in the manner that we did, what kind of a man would he be? Not a man that would look anything similar to the person he's been for 52 years. And that was going to affect the way that he would interpret disease and even have the will to fight. And that's another reason I went into the nutrition aspect of this. So first, anti-inflammatory diet for sure. There's specific testing that we can do to make sure that it's bio-individual, meaning what are inflammatory foods for you versus me, right? Mm-hmm. And be able to kind of capitalize on those. But of course, mainly plant-based, especially with gastric cancers, in order to avoid obstructions. We really avoid all of red meat. There was some animal protein, but a lot of really healthy fats as well. Okay. Olive oil, lots of avocados. And if they're really a lot of juicing as well for detox. And the other thing that's really important it is the common denominator in every single cancer patient, and I cannot stress this enough, is a blood sugar dysregulation. What do I mean by that? Most people not only do not eat what they're supposed to be eating, like healthy foods, more like processed, we eat on the run, we're always stressed out, we lack sleep. The other important part is not just what we're eating, but when we're eating it. That part is essential. So one of the things that I do for my clients is that I give them an actual play-by-play from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to sleep. And I actually start to move them towards a better way of living and approaching our daily lives, right? That's why one of the 4 pillars is mental and emotional wellness, because that part, once I get that part down and packed, then I'm able to create more of an actual schedule for them. Because when we see a blood sugar dysregulation, that means that you're having tons of spikes constantly. That lot of that, it's obviously that's more cortisol in the body, that is more inflammation throughout the body, and the body, and more oxidative stress in the body. Those are all the things that promote cancer growth. So we want to mitigate that. So anti-inflammatory diet, blood sugar regulation, lots of hydration, because we know that chemo makes you very dehydrated, and most likely they were already dehydrated to begin with. Juicing to make sure that we're getting all of the vitamins and minerals that we need. And one of the other things, obviously, managing stress and supplementation. So I do put specific supplements, starting with analyzing what are the supplements, what are the vitamins that are being depleted from the chemo, the specific chemo that they're taking. Okay.
Yeah.
So pretty much all of that.
I think that's very important, because I think one part of the mental well-being, such a strong pull, but at the same time so hard to take care of. A lot of times you're like, okay, what I have to eat, or I have to go to the doctors, all these other appointments, that you just feel overwhelmed as a patient, to what you have to actually stop, take a step back, and make sure that you're eating at the right times, because it is true. You become stressed, you become overwhelmed, and you just don't have that time. You just don't make the time as a priority,
100%. But remember too that the medications are affecting you in a way that you're not likely to eat. One of the main complaints is cancer patients don't want to eat. And that in itself is a sign that we're not doing well. So I always say, once again, not quantity, it's about quality. So even with cancer patients, when they come to me and they've already lost 100, and I have one specific patient or client that this is her 3rd year fighting colorectal stage 4 cancer. None of the chemos have worked, none of them. And she's exhausted. She came to me with so much acid reflux. She was spitting up bile. She was already 107 pounds when she came to me. Okay. With sores in her mouth and all through her esophagus, could barely hold half a meal, if that, down. I can tell you that, I mean, she followed everything to the T. She's been following everything to the T. She is currently 132 pounds. So not only have we gotten her to gain weight, she no longer has that acid reflux. She eats 3 meals a day. She juices twice a day. She has her snacks. She goes to sleep at the times that she's supposed to. She has energy. She's returned back to work. Okay. So here's a person that, even though is in cancer, she's not cancer free, but she is thriving. Now we're giving her body the chance to fight, the chance to fight the cancer, because if the body created the cancer, I really believe our bodies can heal it. And that's the key. That's where the key lies, right? Chemo, radiation, surgeries, all of these hyperbaric chamber, vitamin C IVs, red light therapy, cold therapy, all these things are just tools, right, to deal with cancer. So in the end, it's for what? To help the client live a healthier life, but they can do that while in treatment too. It's not, people kind of compartmentalize that, and it shouldn't be. So one of the things that I was saying earlier is the importance of starting on a good nutritional plan as soon as you're diagnosed, because when you've already been in treatment, and you've lost 100 pounds, 120 pounds, now we're dealing with a much more diseased body, right? So that having to come over here is going to take a lot longer than when somebody is first diagnosed and says, you know what, I'm going to start changing right now. Because a lot of people get so overwhelmed and they're like, you know what, I'm going to wait until I do chemo, or I'm going to wait till later. And that's when I see things kind of really sometimes take a turn for sometimes not the most positive way.
Yeah.
So I honestly believe if you're going to change, the change is now. There's no better time than in the present moment.
I think that's very important, because what you eat is so imperative. I know for myself, going to an anti-inflammatory diet and starting from scratch again and say, no, how can I support my body through this process? How can I support my body and give it what it needs so it can fight? Because I also believe we're wonderfully made and beautifully made, designed by God to work. So every single
Correct.
cell in our body wants to work. It just needs the right nutrition and it's just the right little mindsets and everything to guide it to what it needs to be done, because I know it can and it will continue healing itself if we do the right thing, right?
Correct. And another thing that I tell people, even for the mental health side, it's what you do on a day-to-day basis, minute to minute, hour to hour, actually is more impacting than you just going in for chemo 3 times a week. Think about it. What's going to impact you more? That chemo, right? And I mean in a good way, because chemo is definitely going to impact you in a negative way. It deals with, it could be, it could help destroy the tumor. However, what's really moving the needle? What we do every single day, or what you're doing every, once a week or every 2 weeks? My husband would get chemo every other week for 3 days in a row, right? So I knew that we would be more likely to move the needle in the direction that we wanted to if we were paying attention to our every single day, um, routines and our nutrition.
Exactly. It's like your atomic habits, right? The small little
Yes,
things that you have to do each day, but compounding, they make a big, huge difference as well. It's
correct. And
amazing.
mentally, like I said, and mentally, it gives the caretaker and the actual patient um, power.
Yeah.
Or that you're not so like you have to like trust on a doctor that you've never even met before,
Yeah.
who also has 1,000 other patients. That to me was something that's one of the things. That's another reason I went into this, because I was like, you know what, I need to be in control somehow. I need to not be in this limbo that I'm in.
Mm. I actually
Yeah,
wanted to ask you about as a
yeah,
carer now. A lot of
yeah.
time because, the cancer, the person that's going through that, you have to support them so much. But as a carer, how do you take care of yourself? So you've been there as a carer. How do you take care of yourself, and how do you suggest other people can take care of themselves? Because they have to, right? It's really important.
Um, you know what? That's an amazing question. And the reason I say that is because there's really nothing for the caretaker. There's nothing out there. I tried to join support groups, nothing stays because people are so worn out. They can't meet. We are exhausted and depleted and strung out in so many different directions, right? So one of the things that I did for myself, I really truly believe in movement of the body to try and control the mind and really have the mind work for me and not against me. Because I always say our mind can either be our best friend or our worst enemy, depending on what those thoughts that we're allowing, right? So I, it's interesting because I was working out very little before my husband was diagnosed. I was like going to the gym once a week, and then I wouldn't go for like 2 weeks, and then I would go for 3 days, and then I wouldn't go again for like a month. It was a hot mess, right? Because I was always busy volunteering at the school and working and, you know, living life and just kind of being like whatever about it. Even though I've been an athlete my whole life, I was just in that stage of life where I wasn't being, you know, as disciplined about my workouts. So one of the things that I said to myself is, I'm going to join this place. It's called F45. So you go in, it's a 45-minute workout. It was intense. And I walked out. And I said, I'm going to sign up and I'm going to go 5 days a week. And those 45 minutes are going to be for me. So I would go to school, drop the kids off, and the class started at 9. So I would drop the kids. I would go in the parking lot. I would cry. I would be crying like most mornings. As soon as I dropped the kids off, I would always be crying. I would do, I'm Catholic, so I would do the surrender novena. I would just give it all to God, and then I would go into that class. And when I tell you I did this for months, okay, I would go into that class and I was just in that class. My mind was not at home with him. My mind was not with the doctors. My mind was not with the kids. I was there for me. I showed up for me. I enjoyed the people that were there working out with me. I connected to them. I plugged into them and I enjoyed their conversations. And I lost myself in the happiness and the energy of the room and of the people that I was working out with. It was 45, it's like me putting an oxygen mask on. Those were my 45 minutes that gave me strength to deal with the rest of the day and the rest of the week. So one of the things that I say is, focus every single day and at least 3 things to be grateful for. Make decisions from a place of love and objectivity versus fear. The other thing is apply solutions and be open-minded to pivoting, because that was the other thing. Like, if we're not applying, like, you have to make decisions on a constant basis. So applying these, whatever I was like learning about, I would apply it, and then I would measure, was it working? And then I would pivot, but I wouldn't just quit if it wasn't working. I was just kind of giving it time and pivoting and adjusting, because we know with anything natural, especially, or things like nutrition, it's not like a pill where it's like, no, this takes time, right? And it takes adjustment, because I had to understand his body in a whole new way, and he had to understand. Another thing that I want to put in here is when a cancer patient is going through chemo, even what they ate 2 days before might not work on the 5th day. So that doesn't mean that it hasn't worked. It just, you needed to pivot. So I want to make sure I explain that, because I had a client that, unfortunately, the wife was very overwhelmed. It was the husband who was sick. And she just kept like everything, every other week she was trying something new. And I was like, listen, if we don't stick to a path, we're not getting anywhere with this. I understand that you're overwhelmed, and I understand that you're scared and you want to just get a result immediately, but it doesn't work that way. We need to stack. We need to build. We need to heal. We need to repair. And to be honest with you, every time they get hit with chemo, it's like they strip everything that we did. Everything gets stripped again. So we got to rebuild again. So I'm like, just stick with it. I promise it works. So I want to make sure I say that. The other thing is give yourself grace. Grace for, not knowing, grace and knowing that you're doing the best that you can for your loved one. The other big one, this is something that is one of my hashtags on my social media, is happy cells. What do I mean by happy cells? Celebrate every win. I mean, celebrate every win. The blood work came back great. Amazing. I'm talking about prom type of celebrating win, right? Like, I won the lottery type of win. That's important. Okay. It was like, you know what? He pooped. He pooped without diarrhea today. Hallelujah, praise the Lord. and it does, guys, it just moves the needle, and it quiets the soul, and it quiets your anxiety, and you can take another breath.
Yeah.
So that's what I would
think
tell all the caregivers out there.
I think that's beautiful. It is true. Celebrating the small wins are so important, because it also gives your brain that check-in, ding, ding. Yeah, I can do this, and I can continue building. Like you're saying, the stacking up. It's so important for gratitude, being praised, for the smallest thing that you do. Like even for me, I got up, when the beginning of my journey was just, I made my bed. That was it. Well done.
That's amazing.
But
That's a great win.
I
How many people don't
know.
make their beds and they're not going through what you're going through?
I know, but for me it was just that pull that I needed to get myself, okay, well, if I can do this, now I can get dressed for the day. And if I can get dressed for the day, one thing at a time, and now, like, as far as we got, I have a book now, I have a podcast, and I'm still living through this. But like you're saying, it's the small little things that you do, and I think it's so important to make time for yourself as a carer. I know as a person going through, that's
Sorry.
somebody going through chronic pain, you have to make time anyway. But for a carer, I think it's so important, because it's a very different situation. So your husband right now, he's in remission, correct?
Yes, I'd like to say cancer-free.
Awesome.
So yes, we are, praise the Lord. It took us, like I said, our diagnosis was January 18th, 2023. And he was considered cancer-free November 17th, 2023. So almost a full year, where we implemented both conventional medicine. We did a low-dose chemo, which we were very fortunate, because we didn't get as many of the side effects had he gone with the full dose. And I think that was, if I had to do it all over again, that would be my suggestion. And we implemented, obviously, major lifestyle changes and a lot of the integrative modalities, like I mentioned before. So red light therapy, hyperbaric chamber, cold plunging. He did exercise, nothing anaerobic, always aerobic, a lot of breathing meditation. Ivermectin, fenbendazole. The other thing that we did was IVs and high doses of vitamin C, very important. What else? A lot of stress, like modalities to deal with the stress. My husband had a lot of trauma when he was a child that were a lot of undealt with, which I really believe cancer is very attached to, especially that's one of the things that I speak to with every single one of my clients. And I can assure you that when you've been diagnosed with cancer, if you just go back 10 years, something critical happened in those 10 years that changed. And it was either a death of someone, something very, very stressful impacted the body and really gave way for the cancer. So far, I have not had a single client without that type of when I go into their history. And so a lot of dealing with stress and trauma that he had, we were seeing a psychologist for that. So, like I said, cancer is a disease of many things. So it was just kind of like plugging in from as many places to help the body and in every way possible.
Yeah.
And a lot of prayer, giving it to God every single day.
No, that's wonderful. I mean, it's beautiful to hear this testimony because not only did your family come together, supporting each other, making time for each other, and also bringing God there, knowing that each step of the way, even though it's going to be challenges, you still stuck with it, and look how many other lives now are able to support because of it, which I think is brilliant. So how can people connect with you?
Okay. So right now we're working on our website. We're very excited. We're doing that. But in the meantime, you can find me on our social media. I have two. My personal, but I do some stuff on there too. It's Liz Nieves 08. And the company is Life and Nutrition by Design, which is the exact same social media on Instagram. So Life and Nutrition by Design. And also people can DM me and send me an email at liz@lifeandnutritionbydesign.com.
Perfect. I'll have this all added as well in our transcription so that everybody can follow you and see amazing work. You take calls from abroad as well, right?
Yes, actually, I work a lot through WhatsApp, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Yeah, WhatsApp is a great way to contact me. If you can DM me or email me, then we'll set up a WhatsApp chat. Correct.
That's good. Liz, just before you leave, what is something that you would like to tell the listener right now? Something that they can take if they're struggling going through the difficult parts like you've went through. What would you say to them?
First of all, cancer is not a death sentence. It's not. It is actually a symptom of dysregulation in your body in various places. And that's all it is. So don't let that word overwhelm you or give up hope or feel like you're so alone, because you're not. I know that it feels that way, but it isn't. If you look at it as there's just certain systems in my body that are not working, and you probably bypassed a lot of the check engine signs, is what I call it, that went off in your body, right? We weren't eating at the right times. We were having a lot of headaches. We were dehydrated. We got sick and didn't mitigate some of, the inflammation that came from that. We've had chronic inflammation due to stress and diet and lack of exercise. So all these things play a part. But know that your body is so intuitive and God is so great. And there is so much that you can do for yourself. And understanding that and having that awareness and, like, to be honest with you, that ownership, I think that's where the mind shift has to come, and saying, I have cancer, fine. Then I'm going to do whatever it takes to make my body healthy again, and let that be. And then the rest you got to give to God. That's it. But know that this is not a death sentence, and that they're not alone, and that there's a lot of people out there that on the contrary, want to connect and want to share, like us. We want to share everything that we know. So reach out, find support groups, cry when you need to cry. But yeah, that it's not a death sentence, that your body can heal itself.
Wow, that's beautiful. Liz, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I mean, the listeners have so much to look forward to seeing and being able to apply these different things that you have given here. Your own journey and your journey of your husband and your family is just amazing. A great testimony as well. And I know, perseverance. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everyone that's listening. Please do follow Liz, look, I'll be putting the hashtags and everything else that you need to follow and
Happy
please
cells.
connect. Yes, happy cells, absolutely. May God bless and keep you, and till next time.
This was the Michele Roy Show.